Oh, wow. Pura vida, mi gente. Much love, much love. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. Always, especially in these live uh, presentations, right? Thank you for stopping what you're doing and being here. And I appreciate everybody else who was listening in later on. Thank you for providing me the time. Today we're gonna do a little refresh. We're gonna get it like it's the first time. We're gonna do a 2 video mix right here. I'm gonna talk a little bit about America, aka Atlantis, aka Phoenicia, aka Canaan, or the true Holy Land. We already know it's the true old world. I just want to remind you of that before we get started. And then we're gonna get into a couple books. Definitely want to get back into a book. That's why I'm doing this. We're gonna get into chapter 1 of that book and some other sources before that. All right. I hope you guys enjoy, and especially all the new people and all the longtime surfers. You know, a little pop quiz, no, so little. We're gonna get this, implied to what we're gonna learn in future videos that got coming with new material. So I just wanted to bring this back just to relate. Be like, hey, remember that video? All right. So we're gonna get it like it's the first time. Again, thanks for being here. Appreciate everybody in the live chat. Thank you. Much love, much love. We're gonna go get these clips started. Hold on 1 second. We live. Appreciate you. All right, all right. Hawa, Hawa, pura vida. Hawa. Hey, much love and respect to everybody that's tuned in right now. Thanks for joining me again. Another presentation here. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Just want to read from a particular book that we read only a little bit from before, so I want to read the whole book. It's not really long. Before I read that book, though, just to add correlation to previous presentations that we've done, previous research regarding the so-called Atlantis, the island of Atlantis. What we've shared before. What we're looking at right now is a map, an official historic map, Atlantis Insula. Atlantis Insula. First of all, what is insula? All right, online etymology dictionary says in Latin, literally an island. All right, insula is literally an island. All right, it's literally an island. All right, so again, we were just looking at this Atlantis Insula, or the island of Atlantis, historic map of 1669 by Nicholas Sampson. They sell it on Amazon, as you can see here. Historic map, historic, it doesn't say pseudo or anything. Historic map works, residential genealogy, Atlantis Insula, Nicholas Sampson, antiquarian. All right, again, maps, etc. Atlantis Insula 1600, Atlantis Insula, right? And what does it keep showing you? The Americas, right? The Americas. So real quick again, Atlantis Insula, Paulus and Swain Auction Gallery. This is a historic map. All right, Sampson's map of Atlantis in California. All right, Sampson's map. This is a little closer we can get of the map so we can zoom in. Just want to show you guys that it literally says Atlantis right here in the bottom, Insula. So Atlantis Island, the whole of Americas. It even says that the Caribbean is the Hesperides, Hispaniola, Hesperides, Hispaniola, Hesperides, Hispaniola, Hespa. The Hesperides are the paradise place to the Greeks and all that. We've been correlating that. We've read many books on that. And again, this is divided into, I guess, the Odyssey of Homer and the lands they were talking about. Like right here, it says autochtons. The autochtons are right here. The Lapsipus, the Menesus, the Aries, All right. Thule Island, the Isthmus, Atlantides. All right, Atlantis, the Isthmus. Again, Atlantis Insula, or the island of Atlantis, all right? So nobody's making this up. You can look up the official, here you go, that's the name of the map, Atlantis Insula by Nicolau Samson. We go to this book. It's called New Atlantis, begun by the Lord Verulam, Viscount St. Albans, I look him up, and continued by R.H. Esquire, wherein set forth a platform of monarchical government with a pleasant intermixture of diverse rare inventions and wholesome customs fit to be introduced into all kingdoms and states and commonwealth. This is written in 1660, all right, 1660, as you can see down here, 1660. And I just want to show this real quick. To my most sacred sovereign, Charles II, King of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, defender of the faith. All right, so this is not just anybody writing anything, silly. They're actually writing to a king. They take this kind of stuff serious back in the 1660s, all right? I'm going to like chapter 1 of this book. It says here, the argument of the New Atlantis, as it was begun by Lord Bacon. They're talking about Francis Bacon. There's some sailors getting lost from Peru to China. We're going to go to this part right here and zoom in. It says here, how the great Atlantis, which we call America, all right? We're reading right here. Let's go to the beginning of the paragraph. The next day's conference relates how that though they lived remote and unknown to all other nations, yet they had the knowledge of the languages, books, and affairs of those that lie at farthest distance, because they were talking about that they had gotten lost in the Southeast Asia, the Solomon Islands place area over there, and how they had the knowledge of ancient Atlantis, a distant place, how the great Atlantis, which we call America, Atlantis, which we call America, they wrote this in the 1600s, all right, to King Charles II, Francis Bacon and all. This is a book they took serious back then. Primary source, they're letting you know straight up, correlating with the map we just saw, how the great Atlantis, which we call America, abounded once in tall ships. America had tall ships. How the people of Peru through the South Sea and those of Mexico through the Atlantic to the Mediterranean Sea did both in 10 years space make 2 great expeditions upon Ben Salem. All right, the people of what? America had very tall ships, a.k.a. Atlantis. All right, Atlantis in America. The Navigators of the Ancient World by Ivor Sapp and George Erickson. We've read from this book many times before. I'm going to go to a quick chapter real quick. We're in chapter 6. It says here, Plato's Atlantis, from myth to reality, all right? Real place. We ain't talking about myths. So-called Atlantis, Atlantis, the Latin, Greek. They added the tis. Where was the Atlantis of myth? Well, if you are presently upright in any part of the Americas, you are standing on it, all right? Where's Atlantis? Well, if you're upright in any part of the Americas, you are standing on it, okay? You're standing on it. Plato tells us in the Timaeus and again in the unfinished Critias that Atlantis was it was real, not imaginary island continent. Island continent, big, in that it was located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the Straits of Gibraltar, in or across the Atlantic Ocean. I just want to show you real quick. We actually, have read from this book also many times in previous videos. Make sure you get all the previous presentations if you can have the time to catch up. Just go back and work your way up. Atlantis, the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Donnelly. And again, this is, people will call this pseudo, but, they have this, like it says here, presented to the libraries, the University of Toronto by Willard G. Oxtoby. It's in their libraries. It's not in their fictional aisle. It's in their historic aisle. This book actually has many sources to back up what it's saying. So just verify the sources with facts. that there was some kind of island called Atlantis on the western side of Europe and Africa. You know, we know it was just talking about America. Even if even if a part sank, it was attached to us. It was part of this part of the world, this side of the world. It made commerce and traded with the other colonies on this side in Central America, South America, North America. All right, so it was part of this kingdom over here. Whatever happened, whatever was done in this so-called part called Atlantis, right, with the technology and something, the people doing something they weren't supposed to, right? Now that's a different story. Who was these Atlantis, right? But either way, they were over here, right? So he shows you a lot of that, but he doesn't try to connect it with the mainland. He just tries to say these are colonies from the island that went down, but it's all the same. All right, now it says the gods of the Phoenicians, also kings of Atlantis. All right, we're just talking about the Americas, man. So why would these Phoenicians have Atlantean gods, right? If they're from the Mediterranean, all the way over there, has nothing to do with them, right? So now it says, not alone were the gods of the Greeks, because they just came from talking about the Greek gods being Atlanteans, right? He broke it down in the previous chapter. So not alone were the gods of the Greeks the deified kings of Atlantis, but we find that the mythology of the Phoenicians was drawn from the same source. They're just getting it from here, all these nations, especially the Greeks. All right, when they're talking about Atlantis and the Western Ethiopians and all that, they're just talking about you over here. All right, when Herodotus is talking about that the ancestors of the Egyptians, they come from a distant Western land where the original people came from. They're just talking about you. All right, this is things you can look up. For instance, we find it in the Phoenician cosmogony that the Titans or giants, Rephaim, we get this in the Bible, Rephaim, derive their origin from the Phoenician gods, Agrus and Agrotus. This connects the Phoenicians with that island in the remote west, far away in the west, in the midst of an ocean, where according to the Greeks, the Titans dwell, the giants. Now, we know in the biblical story, Jehoshua, Moses sent Joshua to spy on the land of Canaan, and what did he find? He found giants. All right, Phoenicians are giants. All right, who was in the land of Canaan? Giants, Phoenicians, Canaanites, the Incas as well, the Mayas, the Olmec say when they reached their land, there was giants there that they had to fight, that they had to remove. All right, the Olmec talk about this, the Incas, the Mayas. All right, they talk about giants being in their land. All right, this corroborates and having to remove them. Okay. All right. Yeah, giants. You guys already know how much research we've done on the giants. All right. Again, we're just going over a lot of clips from other older videos. Doing a little mix here on this history that all this research we've done. As you guys can see, we've done also, we read from Researches into the Lost History of America, that book completely, how it connected all, the mythological gods of Asia, Europe, Africa, being real people or real geographical places in ancient America. Let's not forget that as well. So apply what you remember from that as we're reading this. All right, it's all saying literally the same thing. Okay. According to Sanconiathon, Uranus was the son of Autochthon, and according to Plato, Autochthon was one of the 10 kings of Atlantis. Talking about an Autochthon, original man. He was in where? America, Atlantis. He married his sister G. He is the Uranus of the Greeks. Uranus. He is the Uranus, the same. Uranus, Uranus, same. Who was the son of Gaia, the earth, whom he married. The Phoenicians tell us Uranus had by G 4 sons. Ilus was L, who is called Kronos, all right, and Betilus, Beth-El, and Dagon. The Dagon. Haven't I told you this man something to do with corn? Didn't I tell you this man corn, which signifies bread corn or cornbread? Bread corn. Is corn not a native plant to America? Huh? Who are these mysterious Dogon? Where do they come from? Were these Phoenicians that got kicked out of Canaan?
All right, what does their name resemble corn so much? Doggone. Corn. And Atlas, Tammuz? Atlas, Tammuz? Are we talking about Thoth? The famous Thoth, our friend Thoth? Talking about the hijack here, the king of hijacks? Here, again, we have the name of two other kings of Atlantis. These four sons probably represented four races, the offspring of the earth. Probably. The Greek Uranus was the father of Kronos and the ancestor of Atlas. The Phoenician god Uranus had a great many other wives. His wife G was jealous. They quarreled and he attempted to kill the children he had by her. This is the legend which the Greeks told of Zeus and Juno. Same story passed down to other gods. In the Phoenician mythology, Kronos raised a rebellion against Uranus, and after a great battle dethroned him. In the Greek legend, it is Zeus who attacks and overthrows his father Kronos. Uranus had a daughter called Astarte, Ashtoreth, Easter, another called Rhea, and Dagon. After he had found out bread corn and the plow, was called Zeus Arostrios. Jesus Christos, Jesus Arostrios. You see what we're getting into? Zeus. Just add a J-E here. It's Zeus. Alright? Not Joshua. We find also in the Phoenician legends mention made of Poseidon, founder and king of Atlantis. Poseidon, king of Atlantis, or the island in America. Kronos gave Attica to his daughter Athena. As in the Greek legends, in a time of plague, he sacrificed his son to Uranus and circumcised himself and compelled his allies to do the same thing. It would thus appear that this singular rite, practiced as we have seen by the Atlantides, so the Atlanteans did that, right? Americans of the old and new worlds. The Egyptians did it. They were over here too. The Phoenicians did it. They were over here too. The Hebrews were over here. The Ethiopians, what do you mean, Ethiopians? People of dark skin. The Mexicans, the Mexicans, what are you talking about? The Mexica people and the red men of America. So these are different. The Mexicans and the red men of America are different. You see how they're separating that? Well, all these people were circumcised. And they all had something to do with America. Right? Isn't that a coincidence? As we might have expected to Atlantis. Kronos visits the different regions of the habitable world. He gave Egypt as a kingdom to the god Tot. Go over there. So when we read the emerald tablets of Thoth, right, or the emerald green tablets of Atlantis, right, written by Thoth, he tells you straight up he was in Atlantis. There was some kind of cataclysm, volcanic. He describes like a volcanic cataclysm. All right. Even in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, they write that Thoth came from a city-state, a city and a lake. In the lake, it was driven by fire. It got dark and fire. Right, like a volcanic eruption. He lived in a city in a lake. Wasn't Tenochtitlan? Isn't it in a lake? Wasn't it built in a lake? Where's the green ibis from? Look at the green ibis, right? That is the ibis, the green ibis. Central America, the green ibis. All right. So again, he gave Egypt as a kingdom to the god Thoth, who had invented the alphabet. He invented the. I thought it was the Phoenicians. Remember, we just got on the other website, it was a Phoenician, so Thoth is a Phoenician. Thoth spoke Paleo-Hebrew. Thoth spoke Paleo-Hebrew, ancient pictograph. The Egyptians called him Thoth, and he was represented among them as the god of letters, the clerk of the underworld, bearing a tablet, pen, and palm branch. Underworld, like Anubis. That's why we got Hermanubis, because we know Thoth is Hermes, Hermanubis is Thoth. It's all the same. It's just different epithets of Thoth. Alright? Bearing a tablet, pen, and a palm branch. This not only connects the Phoenicians with Atlantis, but shows the relations of Egyptian civilization to both Atlantis and the Phoenicians. It's all connected. You see, this is all right here. We're talking about the true old world. Atlantis / Amaruka. There can be no doubt that the royal personages who formed the gods of Greece were also the gods of the Phoenicians. Same. We have seen the autochthon of Plato reappearing in the autochthon of the Phoenicians. the Atlas of Plato in the Atlas of the Phoenicians, the Poseidon of Plato in the Poseidon of the Phoenicians, while the kings of Mestor and Menesus of Plato are probably the gods Misor and Aminus of the Phoenicians. Sanctonian tells us, after narrating all the discoveries by which the people advanced to civilization, that the Cabiri set down their records of the past by the command of the god Thoth, and they delivered them to their successors and to foreigners, of whom one was Osiris, the inventor of the three-letter, the brother of Chua, who is called the first Phoenician. And this is in Lornement and Cavalier, Ancient History of the East, Volume 2, page 228. So remember that T-A-A-U-T, Thoth, is the Phoenician Thoth, same person. This is how they wrote it, same. All right. This will show that the first Phoenician came long after this line of the kings or gods, and that he was a foreigner. All right. Remember now, he was a foreigner. This first Phoenician god or king, he was a foreigner as compared with them, and therefore that it could not have been the Phoenicians proper who made the several inventions narrated by Sanconiathon, but some other race for whom the Phoenicians might have been descended. Alright, descended. They were descended. And in the delivery of their records of the foreigner Osiris, the god of Egypt, we have another evidence that Egypt derived her civilization from Atlantis. Egypt from Atlantis. Egypt, Tamari, was in Atlantis. The Semitic languages also are all varieties of one form of speech. Though we do not know that primitive language from which the Semitic dialects diverge, they don't know, so how can they say where it comes from? They don't know. They just know it's all similar. They know they're all similar and related. Yet we know that at one time such language must have existed, that one mother tongue. Alright, we're talking about in Atlantis, in America. We cannot derive Hebrew from Sanskrit or Sanskrit from Hebrew. Alright, they're not telling you that Hebrew came out of Sanskrit because they try to say Sanskrit is the oldest, or that Sanskrit's from Hebrew, or that Sanskrit came out of Hebrew, but there seems some similarity there. There has to be a common language somewhere there. That was in Atlantis. But we can well understand how both may have proceeded from one common source. They are both channels supplied from one river, and they carry, though not always on the surface, floating materials of language, which challenge comparison and have already yielded satisfactory results to careful analysis. Outlines of Philosophy of History, Volume 1. Alright, this is studies people have done. They know that Sanskrit and Hebrew are the same. Didn't I tell you the Nagas? Who's the ancient Nagas? Who founded the whole Naga thing, the whole teachings? It was Prince Maya. Do you remember my Naga video? Untold Ancient American Truth, I believe part 6 or 7. Alright, it was Prince Maya who brought all this knowledge and civilization to Hindustan, India, the other India, Hindustan. Alright, and we see Sanskrit and Hebrew are similar. We're talking about Paleo Hebrew, Paleo, ancient pictograph Hebrew, right? They call it Hebrew, but you know, just the way we reference it. There was an ancient tradition among the Persians that the Phoenicians migrated from the shores of the Erathian Sea, and this has been supposed to mean the Persian Gulf. All right, it was supposed, it's not though. So remember, the Phoenicians migrated from somewhere else. All right, but there was a very old city, Erythia, in the utter ruin in the time of Strabo, which was built in some ancient age, long before the founding of Gades, near that site of that town on the Atlantic coast of Spain. May not this town of Erythia have given its name to the adjacency? And this may have been the starting point of the Phoenicians in their European migration. So they're saying instead of that being the location where they began, is that the location they got to first in Spain, and then did their European migrations from there. It would even appear that there was an island of Erythia. In the Greek mythology of the 10th labor of Hercules consisted in driving away the cattle of Geryon, who lived in the island of Erythia, an island somewhere in the remote west, beyond the pillars of Hercules, in the Atlantic Ocean. That's where Erythia was. Talking about America, the Phoenicians, the real Erythia was a remote island the west, beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Okay, this is from Murray's Mythology, page 257. Hercules stole the cattle from this remote oceanic island and returning drove them through Iberia, Gaul, over the Alps and through Italy. It is probable that a people emigrating from the Erythraean Sea, that is, from the Atlantic, first gave their name to a town on the coast of Spain, and at a later date to the Persian Gulf, as we have seen the name of York carried from England to the banks of Hudson and then to the Arctic Circle. So they're saying they carried that name with them to Europe and Spain and all these places and named it that from here. The builders of the Central American cities are reported to have been a bearded race. The Phoenicians, in common with the Indians, practiced human sacrifices to a great extent. So who are these Indians that were doing it too? You know, we gotta stop grouping these people together. We know when they talk about Phoenicians, they're grouping already people together like Canaanites, Hamites, Moabites, a lot of these Jebusites. All right, we're gonna read that. All right, so they're grouping a lot of people together, and we know that a lot of these people, even in the Bible, say that they did sacrifice, right? They were doing things, you know, that they shouldn't have been doing. All right, so it says the Phoenicians, in common with the Indians, practiced human sacrifice to a great extent. So when you hear stories of these nations over here in America doing human sacrifice, so which nations were they? Are we talking about the so-called Phoenicians that were here, that settled in the lands of Shem, that settled in the lands of Shem and the land that was not given to them, and then Joshua had to drive them out because they were doing all kinds of crazy stuff like human sacrifices? They worshiped fire and water, adopted the names of the animals whose skins they wore. Skins they wore? They wore skins? That is to say, they had the totemic system, telegraphed by means of fires, poisoned their arrows, offered peace before beginning battle, and used drums. Bancroft's native races.
All right, so real quick, you know, we're talking about so-called Phoenicians. In general, we're talking about seafarers, seafaring peoples, you know, and you know, it's supposed to mean people coming out of a land called Phoenicia and stuff, just coming out literally of the Holy Land. It wasn't like a nation, but yeah, a group of peoples. It also included Hebrews, Danites, you know, all different peoples as so-called Phoenicians, seafaring races or peoples, you know, and that actually came out of the true old world from here and ended up in other places of the world. All right. And that's what we're going to kind of talk about, get into.
All right, so check this out. So Bancroft, we have that book, real good historian, a lot of good sources in his book. All right, he even referenced that the Phoenicians had a lot of similarities to some of the Indian nations here. The extent of country covered by the commerce of the Phoenicians represents to some degree the area of the old Atlantean Empire. Their colonies and trading posts extended east and west from the shores of the Black Sea through the Mediterranean to the west coast of Africa and of Spain and around to Ireland and England, while from north to south they ranged from the Baltic to the Persian Gulf. They touched every point where civilization in later ages made its appearance. Strabo estimated that they had 300 cities along the west coast of Africa. When Columbus sailed to discover a new world or rediscover an old one, he took his departure from a Phoenician seaport founded by the great race 2,500 years previously. The Phoenicians had already been in the Iberian Peninsula, right? They had previously been driven out. Remember, they have been driven out of Canaan, so they had went over to that side. Remember, they asked for permission to settle Northwest Africa over there, and they also settled in the Iberian Peninsula. A lot of the British Isles, they settled in all those areas, his so-called Phoenicians. This Atlantean sailor, with his Phoenician features sailing from an Atlantean port, simply reopened the path of commerce and colonization, which had been closed when Plato's island sunk in the sea. You see, so they're saying Columbus was an Atlantean, descendant of a Phoenician, talking about Moabite, Canaanite, talking about more. What are we talking about here? We're talking about Atlantean. And it is a curious fact that Columbus had the antediluvian world in his mind, even then, for when he reached the mouth of the Orinoco, he thought it was the river Gihon that flowed out of paradise and he rode home to Spain, there are here great indications suggesting the proximity of the earthly paradise, for not only does it correspond in mathematical position with the opinions of the holy and learned theologians, but all other signs concur to make it probable. Columbus letting you know, when he reached the Orinoco, he had reached close to Garden of Eden. It had to be, he said. It had to be.
All right. Also want to add, remember the research we've done on the ancient Israelites that ended up in the Iberian Peninsula. We're talking about the series, Israel and the Nations of Europe. We're talking about Jeremiah and the queen, the king's daughters, and we're talking about the Danites, and we're talking about the Melanesians, I believe it's called Malaysians. Yeah, and all the different groups that they would be calling so-called Phoenician, grouping under Phoenician. Is what I'm trying to explain for you today. Okay, so again, we're just getting like it's the first time we're getting some throwback drop, different clips of it. All right. Hope you're enjoying. Thanks for tuning in. And yeah, people make claims. A lot of people make claims, but they never got the real sources actually really saying that. You guys got to understand, a lot of people still try to argue and say, oh, Atlantis is in Mauritania in Africa. You got to understand that when you read Plato's description of Atlantis, it was bigger than Libya and Asia. That doesn't even fit in the Atlantic Ocean. It's bigger than just a little place in Mauritania. Like, that's just a colony. You're seeing it in reverse and you're holding on to things, So hopefully this helps you understand that there is a true, real old world. And that's what I'm trying to show you, where these so-called Phoenicians are really coming out of. The Phoenicians / Atlanteans / so many things. All right, let's keep going. Let them know, Kurimeo.
Senconiaton claims that the learning of Egypt, Greece, and Judea was derived from the Phoenicians. It would appear probable that while other races represent the conquest of or colonizations of Atlantis, the Phoenicians succeeded to their arts, sciences, and especially their commercial supremacy, and hence the close resemblances which we have found to exist between the Hebrews, a branch of the Phoenician stock, and the people of America. All right, so we're done with this chapter. Just wanted to get a little reference of that for you. All right, so before I continue with Procopius, because I just want to make sure we understand what we're reading when we're reading things from people, certain specific people. This is not Wikipedia, right? So the Encyclopedia Britannica tells us that Procopius is a Byzantine historian, all right? Procopius, born probably between 490 and 507 in Caesarea, Palestine, now Israel, died in 565. Byzantine historian whose works are an indispensable source for his period and contain much geographical information. Britannica Encyclopedia right here is telling you straight up. It's an indispensable source. Look up who Procopius is. All right, I just wanted you to know. All right, so I wanted to read to you what Procopius said. All right, the part he's talking about. So I went straight to the book. All right. Now it's called The Wars of Justinian. So again, Procopius has a whole series of books. All right, so I start again right here. Let me just zoom in a little bit. There we go. Okay, so I'll start right here where it says, as the narration of events has now brought me to this point, it is necessary to go back and explain from where the nations of the Moors came to Libya. Where did these nations of the Moors came to Libya? How did they get to Libya? I thought they were always there. So they came to Libya and how they settled there. All right. When the Hebrews, now this is Procopius, this is his own words. When the Hebrews had left Egypt and had come near the boundaries of Palestine, Moses, a wise man who led them on the journey, died. And the leadership passed to who? To Jehoshua, Deuteronomy 34, right? The death of Moses. The power went to Jehoashi. He led the Israelites into Jerusalem with the sword, not on a donkey, right? Saying peace to everybody. He took over, assigned by Moses and Hawa, right? He took over. The son of Nun. The son of Nun, is Nun a person? Nun is the letter N in Paleo Hebrew. Noon means air, sun, continuity. Air, the sun, air, the air, Joshua, the air, who led this people into Palestine, who led his people into Palestine, Dash the hijack, talking about the true old world, by displaying a valor in war greater than it's natural for a man. All right, he displayed so much valor in war that it was like impossible, like a miracle, like he was being helped, and he was being held by Hawa, the Most High, regain his land for his people. All right, by displaying valor in war greater than is natural for a man, he gained possession of the land. After overthrowing all the nations, he easily won the cities and seemed to be altogether invincible. He was invincible. They couldn't mess with Jahawashi. It's a coat, the priest king. They couldn't mess with. He was invincible. Now, at that time, the whole country along the sea from Sidon, as far as the boundaries of Egypt, was called Phoenicia. Talking about America, all right? It was called Phoenicia. It was also called the land of Canaan, same place, right? In ancient times, one king ruled over it, as is agreed by all who have written the earliest accounts of the Phoenicians. In that country, there lived the very populous tribes, the Gergesites, the Jebusites, and some with other names by which they are called in the history of the Hebrews. All right? So you see these Phoenicians that keep getting, they're just a group of people. Two of those tribes are the Gergesites and Jebusites. We know that Joshua, right, when he got to Canaan or Jerusalem, the original Jerusalem, right, promised land, there was Jebusites there, Canaanite Jebusites there that he had to drive out, giant Jebusites. All right, so they're telling you straight up. They're telling you straight up. Straight up. These are Moors. They're telling you straight up. Procopius is telling you straight up here. These were Moors. These was their land. This is who Joshua drove out. Some of the tribes. When this people then saw that the invading general was irresistible, they couldn't mess with Joshua. They emigrated from their ancestral homes and moved to Egypt. They moved to Egypt. Are we talking about Tamari? Are we just talking about just another part of America, Tamari, which adjoined their country, which was next to their country? Yes, they were. Yes, they were talking about Tamari. Tamari. Finding there no place sufficient for them to live in, given that there has been a great population in Egypt from ancient times, since there was no room there next to them, so many nations already there, right, in America, they proceeded to Libya. They established numerous cities and took possession of the whole of Libya, as far as the Pillars of Hercules, and they have lived there even up to my time, using the Phoenician tongue, straight up letting you know that these so-called Moors, right? He's saying the Moors, the nations of the Moors that were in Libya in his time, 500 AD or BC, whatever. All right, these are all Phoenicians that got driven out by Joshua. All right, another source, right, telling you straight up, these were Phoenicians, and they even spoke the Phoenician tongue or Paleo-Hebrew. We are they who fled from before the face of Joshua, the robber, the son of Nun, the robber. So now Joshua became the robber. They were.
All right, we ain't done. All right, just want to switch up to another video real quick. Appreciate everybody that's tuned in. All right, just give me 1 second right here. Let me just find it. All right, and we're gonna continue. So we're talking about so-called Phoenicians, We're gonna integrate another video, another research we've done. We're gonna get like it's the first time. We want to definitely get back into this book right here. We're gonna read chapter 1 of this good book. It's pretty good. We gotta be ready to dodge some hijacks, but in general, when they're talking about Phoenicians and all that, they try not to talk about, referencing ancient America, but we know that's what they're talking about. So always have that in mind. All right. And yeah, so we're gonna the influence that this author, this book is talking about of so-called Phoenicians, these seafarers coming out of the true Holy Land, and the British Isles, showing some of the indigenous or the local oldest writing and inscriptions there. So 1 second, let me get to that video. All right, we're gonna get into this book. It's called Phoenician Origin of Britons, Scots, and Anglo-Saxons, but by a.k.a. Waddell. We actually read from this book a little bit in my part 2 of the Ireland and Chaldea videos when we're talking about the Picts. We belly flopped to a chapter a little more ahead of this book that we're going to get into a little bit later as well. I just wanted to go ahead and show this figure right here. It says Aryan Phoenician inscriptions on Newton stone. Tartolon, king of the Scots, about 400 BC, calling himself Briton, Hittite, and Phoenician. You see that? That's over there. Again, the Phoenician origin of Britons, Scots, and Anglo-Saxons. Discovered by Phoenician and Sumerian inscriptions in Britain, by pre-Roman Britain coins, and a massive new history. This is in the London University, all right? So Waddell is fellow of Royal Anthropological Institute, Folklore and Societies, Indian Archaeological Survey, and ex-professor of Tibetan London University, all right? This is from 1924. And we go right into the chapter 1, first part of this book. It says here, the Phoenician origin of the Britons, Scots, and Anglo-Saxons. The Phoenicians discovered to be Aryans in race and the ancestors of the Britons, Scots, and Anglo-Saxons. All right, so I wouldn't be generalizing like all of them, but all right, we're gonna see what they're gonna say about what they got to say about them being the Aryans. All right, remember we got into the whole Aryan, Celtic, and Sanskrit, Hebrew, races on when we're talking about, or nations when we're talking about Ireland of Chaldees. They were mentioning the original languages and people. Now it says, in the preface, it is explained that the most suitable starting point to begin unrevealing the tangled skein of history for the lost threads of origin of the Britons, Scots, and Anglo-Saxons is from the fresh clues gained on the solid ground of the newly deciphered Phoenician inscriptions in Britain. The chief of these Phoenician inscriptions, and the first to be reported in Britain, is carved upon a hoary old stone of about 400 BC. See frontispiece, dedicated to Bel, the Phoenician god of the sun. All right, they got this in Britain. They found this in Britain by a votary who calls himself therein by all three titles of Phoenician, Briton, and Scot. All three titles he calls himself by ancient forms of these titles, and whose personal appearance is presumably illustrated in the nearly contemporary sculpture from his homeland, figure 10, page 46, all right? And thus preserving for us the name and titles of a prehistoric literate Phoenician king of North Britain upon his own original monument. It at the same time supplies a striking proof of the veracity of the ancient traditions cited in the heading, which the eastern branch of Aryans has faithfully preserved in their famous epic, the Great Bharats or Mahabharata, in the regard to the prehistoric worldwide civilizing conquest of the Punch or Phoenicians, the greatest ruling clan of the Aryan Bharats or Brihats. All right, so listen to what they're saying, combining the Hindu culture, Aryan, Indo-Aryan that eventually went over there, right, to Hindustan. Talking about this famous epic, the Aryans had the Great Bharats, which they're calling the Phoenicians. The Aryan Bharats or Brihats, who we shall find were the ancestors of the Brits or Britons, the Britons, Britons, the Brihats, Bharats, Brits, Brihats, all the same people they're saying here, or Britons, our own ancestors. Again, so all right, just want to go ahead and emphasize, remember what we've been learning. This is again old clips. The whole word in Hebrew, barat, is like covenant. So the people of the covenant, Brit, Barat, Brat, Barat, the bards and the Barats and the Brahmans, It's all related. We've broken this down in different ways in different videos. I just want to remind you of that. And also, when they're talking about, being the some of the ancestors of the English and Scots here, let's also remember the book Ancient and Modern Britons that we read. We read the whole volume 1, you know, and how it was talking about the Gypsies and the so-called Egyptians coming out of Canaan and Phoenicians and the Scottish Egypto Scots. Do you guys remember that? Right? So this is the same thing they're talking about, just again a different perspective, a whole other drop, so we can again refresh and put together. But you guys see how interesting it starts getting. Brits, Barats, Brits, and people of the covenant. Remember that. And the amplifying second quotation in the heading from the early Aryan Psalms, also preserved by the same eastern branch of the Aryan Barats or Britons, discloses the Phoenician motive for erecting this inscribed monument in early Britain to the god of the sun, with his special symbol of the swastika cross, an emblem embroidered on the dress of the priest and priestesses of the sun, and figured freely with other solar symbols on Phoenician and early Britain monuments and on pre-Roman Britain coins, as we shall see later. All right, so real quick, want to go back to the monument right here. This says here Bel, the god of the sun and father god of the Phoenicians. All right, it says here from a Phoenician stele of about the 4th century BC. Again, they're finding things like this in Britain. This is what they're comparing. Continuing, says this brittle Phoenician inscription in Britain, and recording unequivocally the Aryan character of the Phoenicians, as well as the Phoenician ancestry of the Britons and Scots, merely confirmed the historical results which I had previously elicited many years before from altogether different sources by discovering new keys to the Phoenician problem. All right, so he's talking about this symbol right here, what we came to know as the swastika crosses on the dress of the Phoenician sun priestess carrying sacred fire, says here. Now he's giving that symbol credit to the Phoenicians. Now, I've shown you guys numerous pictures of American Indians wearing the same symbol in their clothing as well. Again, we're coming from a video I did the other day or yesterday about Phoenicians, right? Coming out of Atlantis or their gods and their whole culture being the same. And we know Phoenicians supposedly in scripture came out of Canaan. Canaan is the promised land. The promised land is America. So yeah, we would find American Indians with this same symbol where he's giving credit to the Phoenicians. And again, they found the same symbol in Britain. These unlocked the sealed stores of history regarding the origin and activities of the early Phoenicians and disclosed them to be the leading branch of the Aryan race, and Aryan also in speech and script, and the lineal parents of the Britons, Scots, and Anglo Saxons. Before proceeding further, therefore, it is desirable to indicate briefly here what these new keys are and the manner in which I was led to discover them. In attacking the great unsolved fascinating Aryan problem, the lost origin of our fair long-headed civilized ancestors of the Brito-Scandinavian and ancient Greco-Medo-Persian race who gave to Europe and Indo-Persia their Aryan languages and higher civilization. All right, so we would debate that, right? It's questionable. All right, if it was from that area of the world, where was Persia? Ancient Persia, really? Where was that? A problem which had so completely baffled all inquiring historians that after failing to find any traces of them as a race, they threw it up in despair about half a century ago. All right, they're talking about the Aryans. They don't really know. Historians can't really prove their origin. I took it up, the problem, at its Eastern or Indo-Persian, and devoted to it most of my spare time during over a quarter of a century spent in India. There were some manifest advantages in attacking the problem from its eastern end. Philologists, ethnologists, and anthropologists were generally agreed that the eastern branch of the ancient ruling Aryan race in India had presumably preserved in the Sanskrit dialect a purer form of the original Aryan speech than was to be found in the European dialects from Greek to Gothic and English.
whilst they also preserved a great body of traditional literature regarding the original location, doings, and achievements of the early Aryan, which had been lost by the Western or European branch in the vicissitudes and destructive turmoil of long ages of migration and internecine wars. Besides this, the long prevalence in India of the rigid caste system by restricting intermarriages between different tribes and the dusky aborigines. The dusky aborigines, do they mean dark complexion aborigines? Was supposed to have preserved the Aryan physical type in the ruling Aryan caste there in relatively purer form than in Europe. After acquiring a working knowledge of Sanskrit and the vernaculars and studying the Indian traditions written and unwritten at first hand, as well as all the reports of the Archaeological Survey Department on excavations, etc., and personally visiting all the most reputed ancient sites and making several fresh explorations and excavations at first hand and measuring the physical types of the people, I eventually found that despite all that has been written about the vast antiquity of civilization in India, mostly by theorists who had never visited India, there was absolutely no trace of any civilization, example, higher civilization in India before the 7th century BC. All right? What are they talking about, huh? Who was there then? If that's supposed to be so old, there's really no proof of that being older than that. He's saying right here, 7th century BC. Indeed, nothing whatever of traces of civilization apart from the rude stone circles has ever been found by the scientifically equipped Indian Archaeological Survey Department in their more or less exhaustive excavations of the oldest reputed sites down to the virgin soil during over half a century, which can be specifically dated to before 600 BC. On the other hand, I observed that historical India, like historic Greece, suddenly burst into view about 600 BC. All of a sudden, right? India, just like all of a sudden Egypt, all of a sudden Rome and Greece, they're powerful, they're great. How did it all start? All of a sudden India, right? In the pages of the Buddhist literature and in the Mahabharata epic, with a multitude of Aryan rulers speaking of the Aryan language, with a fully fleshed Aryan civilization. They already had everything, is what he's pointing out, of precisely the same general type, which has persisted down to the present day. There's no history of that in India, origin, right? The question then arose, whence came these Aryan invaders suddenly into India about the 7th century BC with their fully fleshed Aryan civilization into a land previously uncivilized? On analyzing this early Aryan civilization, all right, who are these people, he's saying, thus suddenly introduced into India in regard to its culture, social structure, customs, folklore, and religion, and of the traditional topography and climate of its ancestral homeland, as described in the Vedas, descriptions wholly inapplicable to India. He's saying the Vedas does not apply to a lot of locations in India. They're not talking about in India and these ancient Vedas, the ancestral homeland of the Aryans, right? I was led by numerous clues to trace these Aryan, or as they call themselves, Arya. All right, pay attention, this means something. Invaders of India back to Asia Minor and Syria, Phoenicia. All right, so he's like, all right, they're not even from there. They're coming in from Asia Minor, it seems. Well, is that their real origin? Let's keep reading.
So I just want to say, Aryan, huh? Is it really talking about a complexion or does it mean noble? Does Aryan really mean noble? Aryan, Aaron, Aryan, like Aaron, like the lion. Ariel, Aryan, huh?
Says, I then observed that the old ruling race of Asia Minor and Syria Phoenicia from immemorial time were the great imperial, highly civilized ancient people generally known as Hittites, right? Hittites, but who called themselves Kati, all right? Kati or Kati with a C, which is the self-same title by which the early Britain kings of the pre-Roman period called themselves and their race. You hear that?
So the Hittites called themselves the Kati or Kati, and so did the early Britain kings of the pre-Roman period. They called themselves and their people, their race, also the Kati. All right. They even, it says here, stamped it upon their Britain coins, the so-called Kati, the word Kati, which is in figure 3. We're going to check that out. And the early ruling race of Aryans, who first civilized India, also called themselves the Katiyo. All right, the Kati, the Aryans called themselves the Kati, the Hittites called themselves the Kati, and the early Britain kings called themselves the Kati. You understand what they're telling you, right? This ancient Kati or Kati, ruling race of Asia Minor and Syro-Phoenicia, also called themselves Ari, with the meaning of noble ones. All right, now this is deep right here. Ari means noble one.
All right, you guys see? I wasn't making that up. There you go. Ari means noble ones. Ari, huh?
Now, this was the identical racial title, which was also applied to themselves by the Indo-Aryans or Eastern branch of the Aryans, who called themselves Arya, the Arya of the older Pali, which had also the literal meaning of noble. All right, noble. Aryan, listen, Aryan means noble, has nothing to do with a white person, so-called white, or a Caucasian, or a pale-skinned person. Has nothing to do with what the Ku Klux Klan or what they try to make us think and represent it. Aryan, the word Aryan, dash the hijack, Aryan meant noble ones, noble, literal meaning of noble, and which is the actual word from which our modern English term Aryan has been coined. It comes from noble. Aryan, noble. So if there was any Aryans anywhere in history, they were just talking about some noble people, people of royal blood, I guess. And these ancient Kati or Hittites are represented in their ancient sculptures in Gothic dress. Here then, already I seem to have found not only the origin of the Indo-Aryans, but also the original land of the Aryan race. All right, the original land, where they're talking about British Isles, huh? And the homeland of the Goths. All right, the homeland of who? The Goths, and of our own ancestral Britons and Anglo-Saxons. And further examination soon confirmed this. All right, so I just want to show you the drawing here of the coins. It says here, figure 3, Kati. Britain coins of pre-Roman Britain of about 2nd century BC with sun symbols. All right, I want to close in on this real quick. As you guys can see, it literally said Kati right on it. And in the British coins, they called themselves the Kati. The Britain kings, the ancient Britain kings called themselves the Kati, just like the Hittites did. The Aryans called themselves the Katiyo, all right? The Aryan, which just meant noble, literally a noble one. The civilization of this Ari, or Aryan race of Kati, or Kati, was essentially of the kind which is now called the Aryan type, and of the same type as that introduced into India by the eastern branch of the Aryas or Aryans. In appearance also these Kati, who were called the White Syrians by Strabo, are seen in their own rock sculptures and sculptured monuments of between 3000 and 2000 BC to be of the Aryan type. They are tall in stature with conical Phrygian calves and snow boots with turned up toes, and garbed significantly in what is now commonly called the Gothic style of dress, for the reason, as we shall see later, that they were the primitive Goths, and the Goths were typically Aryan in race. All right, so again, we got to dodge the hijack big time, because I know they're trying to say that these people are so-called white, as they're saying Strabo said, called them white. But what did Strabo really say? Was he talking about complexion? What he mean? These pure people, right? The pure Syrians, So if he's distinguishing also, now pay attention, now if he's making a distinguishment of white Syrians, then does that mean that there's black Syrians? All right, so that's what I mean. We got to analyze everything that's being said here. Again, white a lot of times meant pure, for purity, right? Pure, a noble people, remember. Now, continuing says, Hittites or Katai, the early Goths. The ruins of their great walled cities, built of cyclopean masonry and adorned with sculptures and hieroglyphic writing, are found throughout the length and breadth of Asia Minor and extend into Syria, Phoenicia, and the country is intersected by their great arterial highways, the so-called royal roads, radiating from their ancient capital at Bogas Koi, or Praeteria in the heart of Cappadocia, the traditional home of St. George of England, and the country in which St. Andrew, the apostle and patron saint of the Scots, is reported to have traveled in his mission to the Scyths or Gatai, the Greco-Roman form of the name Goth. The historical significance of this fact will be seen later. All right, so first of all, let's look at this image. This is how they're basically the early Katai or Kati or Hittites in their rock sculptures. All right, this is how they were dressing. Look at with their Phrygia, they call the Phrygia hat, the cone. Phoenicians, Aryan, you see like the Phoenician, the symbols from Atlantis, as we got before, as well. How the Phoenicians basically had the same deities and beliefs as the Atlanteans. These ancient imperial Kati, people of Asia Minor and Syria Phoenicia, are the same ruling race which are now generally known as the Hittites. All right, these are the same people. They're saying they were the Hittites. All right, for although calling themselves Kati, and called also thus by the Babylonians and ancient Egyptians, the Hebrews corrupted the spelling of that name into Heth and Hit in their Old Testament when referring to them as the ruling race in Phoenicia and Palestine. On the arrival of Abraham there, and the translators of our English version of the Hebrew text have further obscured the original form of the name by adding the Latin affix "ite," thus arbitrarily coining the modern term Hittite, or Heth. It was supposed to be Heth or Kath, Kathi. The identity of these Kathi, Ari, or Hittites with the eastern branch of the Aryans who invaded and civilized by Aryanizing India, now made practically certain by my further observation that the latter people also called themselves in their epics by the same title as did the Hittites. They called themselves Katillo Arillo in their early Kali vernacular, and latterly syncretized it by the intrusion of the R into Kshatriya Arya, and Hindi Khatri Arya, and these Indian names Katillo, Kshatriya have the same radical meaning of cut or ruler as the Hittite Kati has. Later, I observed that the early Kati or Hittites, as well as the Phoenicians, called themselves by an early form of Barat. Example, as we shall see the original of Brit or Briton, and that they also used that form itself, and that their language was essentially Aryan in its roots and structure. Hittite, they're saying. This practically established the identity of the Kati or Hittites with the Indo-Aryans and disclosed Cappadocia in Asia Minor as the lost cradle land of the Aryans. All right, so he's still saying, because remember, he still believes, this author, that the real promised land, that the Middle East, all that, and Mesopotamia is the cradle. So he's putting them there. That was a waypoint, right, to go from Britain. The Phoenicians were coming from the real Canaan, America. Let's not forget that. All right, so we got, again, we pull out the babies and we dodge the hijack, because we're in the mind of a hijack, even though he's digging up, he's picking up some Jews on his research and sharing it with us. This now led to my discovery of the key or rather the complete bunch of keys to the lost early history, not only of the Indian branch of the Aryan and its parent Aryan stock back to the rise of the Aryan race, but also to the lost history of the Khati or Hittites themselves, who have hitherto been known no earlier than about 2000 BC or still later. I had long observed that amongst the most cherished ancestral possessions which the Indian branch of the Katillo, Arillo Barats, had brought with them from their old homeland to their new colony in India. All right, a new colony, right? Their old homeland, right? Where were they? The Barats, Britons, Brits, right? Their own homeland wasn't Asia Minor, it was over there before they had come from, the real old world, Atlantis, right? a.k.a. America. We got that yesterday, right? As we know it as America. Remember Atlantis, or as we know it, America. Remember that was written in the 1600s. Francis Bacon wrote that. All right, so again, the Arillo Barats had brought with them from their old homeland, right, in Britain, the British Isles, to their new colony in India, like Aeneas and his exile jealously, bringing with him his rescued household gods. From his old Trojan homeland were their treasured traditional lists of their ancestral Aryan kings, extending back continuously to the first Aryan dynasty in prehistoric times. All right, so it says here, figure 5, Phoenician coin of Carthage, inscribed Barat, right? Barat. The Phoenicians called themselves Barat too, Brits, Barat. Note the wind sun horse, Asva of the Khati Britain coins, all right? The wind horse, is that a dragon, the unicorn? And on observe the head of Barati or Britannia, Barati, Britannia, Barat, all right? Those treasured ancestral Aryan kings lists, they embedded in their great epic, the Mahabharata, in summary, but in their older epics, the Purana, they religiously preserved them in full detail. There they cover many hundreds of pages, recording in full detail the main line and numerous branch line dynasties from the commencement of the Aryan period down to historical times, and specifying the names and titles of the various kings, reproduced with scrupulous care, and citing in regard to the more famous of them their chief achievements, thus making the record something of a chronicle of the kings as well. These traditional Aryan kings are implicitly believed by all Brahmins and modern Orthodox Hindus to be the genuine lineal ancestors of the present-day ruling Indo-Aryan caste in India. And often I observe in my travels through the country groups of villagers listening with rapt attention and reverence as one of them read out the narrative of great achievements by some of these traditional early Aryan kings, who are confidently believed to be the genuine historical kings of the early Aryans and the ancestors of the purer Aryan ruling princes in India today, some of whom trace their ancestry back to them. And again, remember, just like in the royal family today in England, we see Queen Elizabeth and all these, whitewash and all these, hijacks. You're going to find it here in India too. Bunch of hijacks that are saying, they are the royal of the ancient Aryans, Aryan men nobles. We're talking about Britons, Hittites, Phoenicians. We're talking about from Canaan. You get it?
All right, so real quick, guys, I just want to show you guys something. All right. So British, right? Ish. The Brit, right, says the word British in Hebrew means covenant man. It is related to the expression Brit and meaning covenant of the people, Isaiah 42:6. These verses refer to the 10 tribes in their places of exile. They help identify the British Isles as a major center for the lost 10 tribes. This is what I was saying. You got to add this knowledge that we already know, where who he's calling so-called Phoenician too. Remember when he's saying they're finding Phoenician inscriptions, that's literally the same as Paleo-Hebrew, what they call in Paleo-Hebrew. The inscriptions the same thing, what they call in Phoenician. It says here in Hebrew nations, the word Brit. In Hebrew, the word Brit, also pronounceable as Brith or Brits, Barat. Brit means covenant or people of the covenant, Bratat, Barat. So in Hebrew vernacular, we have Brit Milah, covenant of cutting, or Brit in short, meaning circumcision. We also find the term Brit Am, covenant of people, in connection with the 10 tribes, Isaiah 42:6 and 49:8. And that is the name of our organization, Brit Am, Hebrew Awareness. What does the Brit Am in Isaiah 42 mean? It says, for Isaiah 42, I am the Lord, I have called you in righteousness. I will also hold you by the hand and watch over you, and I will appoint you as a covenant to the people, as a light to the nations. Okay. So you guys get what I'm trying to say. I hope, we went over this in different videos. We related this word a lot to, what it's literally, it doesn't mean so noble. Yeah, noble people, right, Brit? Or remember, we're going to get more into the nations of Israel and Europe, as we're talking about, since we're talking about Brits, we're going to talk about Brutus still. I haven't done the video on that. I'm going to go ahead and do a video on that. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the video now, just so you guys, I just wanted to break that down real quick. So they were talking about Brit, and Hittites only, you know.
Modern Western Vedic scholars, without a single exception, as far as I am aware, have summarily rejected all this great body of epic literary historical tradition as mere, just as modern writers on British history have arbitrarily rejected the old traditional ancient British chronicles preserved by Geoffrey and Nennius. The excuses offered by Vedic scholars for thus rejecting these ancient epic traditional records are twofold. Firstly, they say that as these voluminous kings lists are not contained in the Vedas, and only a very few of the individual kings therein are mentioned in the Vedas, which books they assure to be the sole source of ancient Aryan tradition, these kings lists must be fabulous. In making such an objection, they entirely overlook the patent fact that the Vedas are merely a collection of psalms, and not all of historical in their purpose, so that one would no more expect to find in them systematic list of kings and dynasties than one would expect to find detailed list of kings, all right, and prophets in the Psalms of David. The second argument of Vedic scholars for rejecting these ancient epic kings list is, as they truly say, that no traces whatever of any of these early Aryan kings can be found in India. But this fact is now disclosed by the new evidence to be owing to the very good reason that none of these early Aryan kings has ever been in India. They didn't originate there, okay? But were kings of Asia Minor, Phoenicia, Mesopotamia, right? They're going with the hijack. They mean the promised land. They were kings from the promised land, and they were also Britain kings, all right? Before they had arrived in India, the Kati, Hittites, right? Before the separation of the eastern branch to India, before they separated and went into India. Picking of these despised traditional epic kings lists of the early Aryans, thus contemptuously rejected by Vedic scholars, I compared the names of their later mainline dynasties with the names of the latter historical Hittite kings of Asia Minor, as known from their own still extant monuments as well as from the contemporary Babylonian and Assyrian records, and I found that the father of the first historical Aryan king of India, as recorded in the Mahabharata epic and Indian Buddhist history, was the last historical king of the Hittites in Asia Minor. You hear that? He said the father of the first historical Aryan king of India, that's recorded in the Mahabharata, right, is the same one that was the last king of the Hittites in Asia Minor. He's going to explain this, who was killed at Karshemish of the upper Euphrates on the final annexation of that last of the Hittite capitals to Assyria by Sargon II in 718 BC.
All right, so when we're talking about that, they're the same people, right? Are we talking about what Anatoly Fomenko's talking about? We're talking about phantoms and duplicates in history. We're talking about the same person. It's the same person, different timelines, huh?
And I further found that the predecessors of this Hittite king as recorded in the cuneiform monuments of Asia Minor and in the Assyrian documents back for several centuries were substantially identical with those of the traditional ancestors of this first historical Aryan king of India, as found in these Indian epic kings list. Thus, the absolute identity of the Indian branch of the Aryans with the Khati or Hittites was established by positive historical proof, and at the same time the Khati or Hittites were disclosed to be Aryans in race and of the primary Aryan stock, and the truly historical character of the Indian epic kings list was also conclusively established. On further scrutinizing the earlier dynasties of these epic kings list, I observed that several of the leading kings of the earlier Aryan dynasties in these lists bore substantially the same names with the same records of achievements and in the same relative chronological order of several of the leading kings of early Mesopotamia. I remember, so who are these kings of Mesopotamia and all that? They go back to Atlantis. We just got the video yesterday. So we gotta, dodge the hijack, because again, we're in the mind of a hijack. He's trying to put the promised land in the desert right there in the so-called Middle East, in a fake holy land. All right? A fake cradle of civilization. It's not over there. We've already broke this down many times. So-called Sumerians, right? Remember the so-called Sumerians and the Akkads, or Akkadians, right? Acadia, Nova Scotia, Sumerians. Remember we just read the book Shinar in Europe, or Summer in Europe, Ireland, and the Ur of the Chaldees, where it was telling you that was most likely in that area over there, as recorded in their own still extant monuments and in the fragmentary ancient chronicles of that land. Still further, I observed that isolated early kings of Mesopotamia, who are only known to Assyriologists from their stray inscribed monuments as solitary kings of unknown dynasty and unknown origin and race. They don't know nothing about these people, these so-called Assyrians. Remember, Assyrians come from Ashur. Ashur is a son of Shem. All right? A son of Shem. Yeah, Ashur is a son of Shem. These are all Semites, Assyrians. All right? So they don't know nothing about their origin, they're saying, and race were mostly recorded in my kings list in their due order and chronological succession in their respective dynasties, with full lists of the Aryan kings of these dynasties who had preceded and succeeded them. It thus became obvious that these Indian epic kings lists supplied the key to the material required for filling up the many great blanks in the early history of ancient Mesopotamia and the dark and prehistoric period there. Not only did these epic kings lists lighten up the dark period of early Mesopotamian history, but they shed a similar illuminating light upon the dark period of early Egyptian history and prehistory as well, and disclosed the wholly unsuspected fact that Menes and his pre-dynastic civilizers of early Egypt were also of this race of the Khati or Hittites. Menes, Mizraim, Menes, Hittite, white Syrians or Aryans. No, they're not white, so-called white, pure, noble, of noble blood. The Khati, the Phoenicians also were now disclosed to be Aryans in race, and Khati, Ari, or Hittite Aryans, by this new historical keys thus placed in my hands. This therefore corroborated the fact found by anthropologists from the examination of Phoenician tombs that the Phoenicians were a long-headed race like the Aryans and of a totally different racial type from the Jews, to whom they have hitherto been affiliated on merely linguistic arguments by Semitists. This Eastern or Indian branch of the Aryans, the Katillo Arillo Bharats, called themselves in their epic the Mahabharata by the joint clan title of Kuru Panch Allah, a title which turned out to be the original of Syro-Phoenician. These Kuru and Panch Allah are described as the two paramount kindred and confederated clans of the ruling Aryans, and they are repeatedly referred to under this confederate title in the Vedas. Now Kur, I observed, was the ancient Sumerian and Babylonian name for Syria and Asia Minor of the Hittites or White Syrians, and it was thus obviously the original of the Surya of the Greeks, whilst Panch Allah is defined in the Indian epics as meaning the able or accomplished Panch. In complement, it is there explained to their great ability. Also, an outstanding trait of the Phoenicians in the classics of Europe. This disclosed Punch to be the proper name of this ruling Aryan clan, whom I at once recognized as the Phoenicians or Phoenicians, the Fenka or Panag or Panasa, seagoing race of the Eastern Mediterranean of the ancient Egyptians, the Phoenix of the Greeks, the Phoenix, right? Like Phoenix, Enoch of the Greeks, and the Phoenix of the Romans, the Phoenix of the Romans, this Punch.
All right, a seagoing race or a seafaring people, a seafaring nation, seafaring peoples. All right, with access to certain maps and cartography and knowledge of maritime skills and all that. A lot of people, think it was like a secret society of like sailors, merchants, traders, explorers, seafarers.
Ruling Aryan clan was celebrated in the Vedas as the most ardent of all devotees of the sun and fire, cult associated with worship of the father god Indra, as in the Vedic verses cited in the heading, and we shall see that the Hitto-Phoenician were special worshippers of the father god Bel, also called by them Indara. Indara, Bel, they called them, the Hittites called their Bel, father god Indara, just like father god Indra of the Hindus, who was the sun cult and whose name is recorded in the early Britain monuments to be examined later on. The Panch Aryan clan was also significantly the foremost seagoing Aryan people of the ancient world in the Vedas, and in which most, if not all, of the many Aryan kings celebrated in the Vedic hymns as having been miraculously rescued from shipwreck by Indra or his angels, were kings of the Panch Aryan clan, and a ship of 100 oars is mentioned in connection with them. These Panch Aryan, and also sometimes called Krivi in the Vedas, which word is admitted by Sanskrit to be the variant of Kuru, which we have seen means Kur of Syria. This confederate Vedic title for them and their kinsmen, the latter Syrians, namely Kuru Panch Allah, is thus seen to be the equivalent of the latter title for these two confederate Aryan ruling clans, the Syrians and Phoenicians, which is referred to in the New Testament as Pseudo-Phoeniki and Englished into Syro-Phoenician. Further, I found that the early Phoenician dynasties in Syrio-Phoenicia, or the land of the Amorites, of the Hebrews, as well as in early Mesopotamia, on the shores of the Persian Gulf, where Herodotus records that the Phoenicians were located before about 2800 BC, also called themselves by the Kati or Hittite title, and also by the early form of Barat. All right, Barat. In their own still extant monuments and documents, and dated back to about 3100 BC, the Phoenician Kati Barat ancestry of the Britons and Scots and of the pre-Roman Briton Kati kings was then elicited and established by conclusive historical evidence in due course. The Anglo-Saxons also were disclosed, as we shall see, to be a later branchlet of the Phoenician Britons, which separated after the latter had established themselves in Britain. This identity of the Aryans with the Kati or Hittites was still further confirmed and more firmly established by further positive and cumulative evidence in 1907 at the old Hittite capital, Bogaskoi in Cappadocia. Winkler discovered the original treaty of about 1400 BC between the Kati or Hittites and their kinsman neighbors on the east and ancient Persia, the Mitanni, who I have found were the ancient Medes, who also were famous Aryans and called themselves Arya, or noble ones, remember? In this treaty, they invoked the actual Aryan gods of the Vedas, of the Indian branch of the Aryans, and by their Vedic names. Significantly, the first god invoked in the Vedic sun god Mitra, example, the Mitra of the Greco-Romans. As soon as some of the latter Aryans made separate gods out of different titles of the Father God. All right, look at these people creating their idols. All right, his name is followed by Indara, that is the solar Indra or Almighty, the principal deity of the Indo-Aryan Vedic scriptures, and as instanced in the verses cited in the heading, the special god of the Bharats or Brihats or Brits and of their Punch or Phoenician clan, and his image and title are represented on ancient Britain monuments and coins. But even this striking historical evidence of itself did not include either the Assyriologists or the Vedic scholars to seriously entertain the probability that the Hittites were Aryans, obsessed with the preconceived notion that the Hittites, whatever their affinities might be, were certainly not Aryans. The present work is the first installment of the results disclosed by the use of newfound keys to the lost history of the Aryan race and their authorship of the world's higher civilization. It offers the results in regards to the lost history of our own Aryan ancestors in Britain and discloses them, the early Britons and Scots and Anglo-Saxons, to have been a leading branch of the foremost world pioneers of civilization, the Aryan Phoenicians, all right? And then we got this figure right here, it says figure 5A, Britain prehistoric monument to Bell at Craignarget, Worcestershire, with Hitto-Phoenician sun crosses, etc., all right? Look at the swastika right here, the cross. All right.
This is what they're calling Hittite, right? That's why they're crediting the Hittites. These inscriptions we can find in the Americas, by different peoples and nations. All right. So he's saying, right, Phoenician Britons, right? Or as he said, what he said before that, Hitto-Phoenicians. So whenever he was saying noble or Aryan Phoenicians, he was saying noble Phoenician seafarers, noble seafaring people, noble seafarers, huh? Okay.
Right, a monument to Bel or Bel, right? A Phoenician god Belus, Bel, all right, Bel, ball, all right? You're spinning on a ball, and that's in, Britain, right? So they broke down here a little bit of the Aryans, his theory. It makes a lot of sense, but the Aryans might be coming off, when we talk about Phoenicians and Aryans and who were the Phoenicians, right? We already got that from yesterday's video. Again, this was chapter 1, goes on to chapter 2. All right, we're just gonna stop it right here in this book for now.
So we're gonna go ahead and end it right there so we can get on to chapter 2 and probably future episodes. But I hope you guys enjoyed the little refresh, so-called Phoenicians, again, seafaring nations, seafaring peoples, a lot of different mixtures and ethnic backgrounds with these so-called Phoenicians. When we're talking about a place where the so-called Phoenicians came out of, we're talking about a true Holy Land, the true Canaan, the true Promised Land, the true Old World, ancient America, so-called Atlantis, the island of Atlantis. Yeah, people still having a hard time with that, Brit, people of the covenant or covenant, Brit, covenant people, the covenant people, remember? So he's mixing up a lot of so-called people into Phoenicians, right? But it's interesting to still pull out the babies from these books. Hope you enjoyed the reading either way. Okay, thanks for joining me. Tonight I'll give you your night back. Appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. All right. I got a lot more videos coming, or every day, hopefully, or as much as possible. Keep it fresh as well. We always got new material, new books, new research. There's so many ways to go, so many topics to cover, and a lot of new people, a lot of people forget what we've done before. So like to go ahead and go over things like this, so we can get it like it's the first time. So we can continue talking about these things and with new material and have reference. All right. So appreciate you guys. Shout out to the live chat that was here. Much love and respect. I also enjoyed reading the live chat and putting all the info together in my head and just following up on what people be saying and putting it all together. That's how we got here. You know, as a master student, not a master teacher. Learning from everybody. We all learn from each other. So appreciate you guys here. Okay. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Wow.